What is nuclear security culture? The IAEA has a specific definition for nuclear security culture that is documented in the IAEA Nuclear Security Series number 7 document from 2008. In that document, it gives you a definition for what is nuclear security culture. It derives that definition from a basic definition of culture, where culture is related to our beliefs and our behaviors, which includes our habits, the decisions and the actions that we take that oftentimes are not coming from our thinking specifically about what actions to take, but just are the natural actions that we do every day. For nuclear security culture, the definition that the IAEA gives is it's an assembly of characteristics, attitudes, and behaviors of individuals as well as organizations and institutions which serve as a means to support and enhance nuclear security. Many times people, when they think about culture, they think of culture from the standpoint of an individual's culture. And they sometimes don't think about the fact that organizations and institutions also have culture. The organization maybe that you work in probably has a particular culture to it in a way it does business, the way it takes decisions and actions. In this particular case, this culture is related specifically to the nuclear security system for a facility, an institution, or particularly a country. Well, you might ask the question, well, okay, so that is what nuclear security culture is. That's the attitudes and behaviors that we might have for those of us who potentially work in or design nuclear facilities. But why is this important? Why is nuclear security culture important? Well, it's important because if we go back to the definition of a culture, culture is many of the decisions and actions that we take are based upon our culture. They're based on our belief system. And they're not necessarily decisions and actions in which we think systematically about those decisions. Oftentimes when you do little things in your life, it's based on those cultural beliefs. This is important because a nuclear security system is a system that is a robust technical system that involves detector systems and detection and delay elements and those physical mechanisms, but it also is based on humans and human decision factors. The humans have to make decisions in the system, and those decisions include whether or not to respond to certain physical elements in the system, whether or not they take the threats seriously, whether or not they potentially could pose a threat to the facility, or whether or not their colleagues working in the facility could potentially pose a threat to the facility. So those cultural beliefs and those decisions that they make can have a big impact on the facility. Now, there are a lot of examples of this. There's very simple examples you can go through. When you go to a particular facility, some of those facilities you'll see a lot of posters around the facility associated with them saying things like, you know, security is up to you. It's the responsibility of every individual. Make sure you pay attention to where you place your bags. Those sorts of details. Simple things like that to try and enhance culture. There's also cultural examples that are associated with sort of larger events that have occurred. And one particular example that is somewhat recent is a major security culture lapse that occurred in July of 2012. At that particular event, this was at the Y-12 National Security Complex in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. 3 particular anti-nuclear activists entered this facility, and the 3 individuals that entered it are not maybe what you might think of as nuclear security threats. One of the individuals, an 83-year-old nun, and then the 2 other individuals was a 63-year-old and a 57-year-old male. So these were relatively senior individuals, and they entered this facility that has a very, very detailed and rigorous nuclear security system. From a physical security standpoint, it is a very hardened system. They had actually just upgraded that facility with $200 million worth of additional upgrades for the security system on that facility. And all of that equipment was in place, but the equipment had been giving false alarms. There had been parts of the equipment that were alarming, and the guards had learned after a while to just ignore those alarms. Just don't pay attention to them, don't bother with it. These 3 activists made use of that. It's not clear whether that they knew about the fact that those false alarms were occurring, but they made use of that as a means to acquire access to the facility, and they actually moved all the way in towards a vault location where they actually painted slogans, anti-nuclear slogans, on the vault. So while they didn't actually get inside the vault, they got all the way to the door of the vault before anyone stopped them. That's a fairly serious lapse in judgment by the human personnel at the facility. And of course, we were lucky in a way that this occurred because these particular individuals were not terrorists. They were not a criminal group from the standpoint they were trying to cause harm. They simply wanted to make their opinions about anti-nuclear activities known. And so they didn't take any action that actually caused any harm to other humans. But it did, however, cause a lot of harm to the facility in terms of its continued operation. The organization that was running that facility lost their contract to run and operate this facility, which is worth millions to billions of dollars. And a lot of that is just because the guards that were there, the security personnel, were just bored. They didn't believe that there was a real threat, that the threat didn't exist. And because of that, they didn't take actions whenever things occurred. They also entered into a lapse where they just got used to certain alarms occurring. Now, of course, they're under much greater scrutiny at that facility. And in fact, the entire Department of Energy, U.S. Department of Energy complex is in a shakeup over this. The U.S. Department of Energy might potentially take over all security forces at all of the U.S. Department of Energy facilities in order to try to eliminate this. Now, the problem with that is why did this occur? Who was responsible for this? Obviously, the answer is the guards had a responsibility, but most of us would say that that responsibility actually goes well beyond just those particular guards. It is really due to a cultural problem that existed both within the facility as well as within the entire infrastructure as a whole. And it starts with this basic concept up here of, did they believe that there was a real threat? And does everyone within the structure believe that? So what we do is we have to take a look at this and say that nuclear security culture is an important part of every security infrastructure. No matter how good your hardware is, without the people behind it, that hardware will not serve any purpose in securing those facilities. Those humans are very important.